To Kevin O'Leary to be unaware enough to say the quiet part out loud.
I hear about the so-called victimless crimes, but the laws on the books, falsification of business records and second degree, issuing false financial statements, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and all these different aspects of it, those are actual crimes. I take it your point is that these should not have been prosecuted?
Everything you just listed off is done by every real estate developer everywhere on earth in every city. This has never, ever been prosecuted.
There is a theory in law that if enough people commit a crime, it automatically becomes legal. You're familiar with the purge, are you not? The entitled arrogance. I don't know if you know this, but most people just can't commit fraud and expect to face no repercussions, even if everyone's doing it. Try getting a car loan by saying you have 10 times as much money as you really do, or claim 20 dependents when you have no children, or say you make slightly less money to qualify for food assistance. I will guarantee you there are not just financial consequences for those lies, but criminal ones. But don't tell that to the investment community, because in their minds, in pursuit of profit, there is no rule that cannot be bent. There is no principle that cannot be undercut, as long as you and your friends are making money. Leave it to Kevin O'Leary.
So it's so funny because I had the same conversation in the barbershop about a week ago. Victim is crime is what they said. But they're trying to. Some people want to say that Donald Trump committed. Leave him alone. Victim is crime. It's not a victimless crime. Jon Stewart said it best. I'll leave it at that for this morning. We got plenty of other things to talk about. The horrific bridge collapse, Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore, was just it's just it hurts. 6 construction workers have lost their lives. 2 of them somehow survived. Good morning, David Youngblood. And it's a little, despite the deaths and the tragic deaths, it's a lot less damage as far as life loss anyway that it could have been by far. Wasn't for the great and swift reaction of let's give credit. I mean, yes, the ship did crash into that beam there, but they yelled Mayday, and let's give credit to them on that, recognizing that they had lost control, which then triggered local authorities who immediately shut that bridge down from cars entering, but they didn't have enough time, unfortunately, to save those workers. They say that the cars we saw, the vehicles we saw, including some cars, some sort of truck go down, was all up there on the bridge already. They were parked. They were construction and bridge workers. They were their vehicles, the ones who unfortunately have perished in this tragedy. I want to talk about that today. Also talk about something about that really so much, of course, stood out, but it stood out in a positive way. And that is Governor Westmore and the mayor there in Baltimore, 2 African American individuals that gave me a very, very good feeling. And we'll talk about that. We're also going to talk about Diddy. We got to talk about Diddy. there's several things that's very concerning and not necessarily Diddy himself. We're going to talk about that this morning. A couple of things. But we're also going to talk about, we're going to have a conversation with about Candace Owens. We promised that conversation yesterday, promised that conversation earlier, but you're going to get it today. And I think you'll find it to be entertaining, at least. But Robin Ayers is going to join that conversation. But a couple of things first. Remember the movie? First of all, remember the movie Friday when Craig? I got to mention this. I forgot to mention this to Greer. But when Craig first, he was played by Ice Cube, of course, got fired on his day off. Well, what could be worse? Well, how about a former Major League Baseball player, a guy named Chad Bradford, who, among other teams, pitched for the Seattle Mariners, the New York Mets, et cetera, et cetera. He retired last year and went into the police academy in in Henderson, Nevada. Well, this week, on Monday, Chad Bradford graduated from the academy. To celebrate on Monday night, Bradford went out and, as they say, tied one on. Bradford was arrested for drunk driving as his car was observed hitting the median on a road in Henderson, swerving and moving recklessly. He blew a 1.09 on the sobriety test. Nevada's legal limit is 0.08. He was immediately fired. Didn't work a day. And Austin is chiming in. Austin said, and this is true, Rona McDaniel got fired on her day off too, just like Craig. But Rona got a $300,000 payout though. Craig got nothing. He had to face his father on the toilet. But isn't Chad Bradford glad he got a baseball pension to rely on? He get fired. He passed. He completed the academy, became a cop. Hadn't even started the job and got fired. Wow. Um, not. We're gonna talk about Diddy Power 96. Yes, we are gonna talk about Diddy. He says those pictures from the parties are not AI generated. He said, "I see Diddy jet is in Antigua. He better try Cuba." Angela Conley says, "If they could stop the traffic, why not radio to the workers to vacate the bridge? Prayers for all." If you watch that, Angela, and a great job. We're going to get into this, though. I don't want to digress, but a great job by the Washington Informer in particular. Talk about black press, and then we're going to talk about that right now. But a great job. Anthony Tillman was on the scene. He was one of the first, if not the first, journalist on the scene for the Washington Informer. Captured some incredible images. Reported back. I lent a hand on that story for the Informer with Hamil Harris. So there was a team, and the Informer continued. Misha Green, the fabulous editor of the Informer, managing editor, had everybody feed that story. Continue to update. And so I dare say perhaps the most comprehensive story on the bridge was from the Washington Informer. And all this leads to this point. So Roland Martin, y'all know Roland, kind of got into, I don't want to say a beef because I think that that exaggerates, but got into a back and forth with, among other folks, Dawn Montgomery and Totally Randy, and others on Twitter about black media, black-owned media in particular. In a nutshell, Dawn wrote this. He says the suggestion of aggregating content was to make sure, because Roland was complaining. Let me just put a little bit more perspective. He was making a point that many of the black-owned media aggregates its content because this part he's 1000% right, a lack of resources. And Dawn says the suggestion of aggregating content was to make sure that these Black media outlets are being unbiased. We've seen how they pick and choose what to cover. We need to hold them accountable for the way they report news. More money will help hire reporters, but this can be done now. 1000% agree with Dawn. Then Roland says, among other things, but even the suggestion of aggregating content is troublesome. All that is about is slapping your byline on someone else's reporting. You're just repeating what others write. And of course, we've seen that happen often. And it goes back to his point about resources. He started to break down who has what, and then he got on his treadmill. We watched him on his treadmill, and he talked about something about, we need to make our own calls. Well, we're going to get into Diddy. We're going to get into all of that, but Greer and I both called and texted Diddy. I also called his attorneys, and Roland mentioned that Newsweek, I think he said Newsweek. If I'm wrong, he'll correct me, I'm sure. But Newsweek got the statement from the lawyer, and everyone else then got the statement. That's the one part where I have to differ with Roland on, or maybe he misunderstand, or maybe I'm misunderstanding. But here's how it goes. I called Diddy's attorneys. Other folks, no doubt, other media called Diddy's attorneys. I called Diddy directly. And that was Roland's problem. He's like, you don't call these people. Black-owned media needs to make these phone calls. They don't need to be lazy. And he's right. They need to make these calls themselves. And I think Diddy's attorneys finally put out a statement because they got a lot of calls. And of course, something else happened that we're going to talk about in a minute, that they put out a statement. So yes, even here at NMPA, we are certainly under-resourced, but we do make the effort. And he goes on his treadmill. He talks about how the federal government, and he noted that it was us, it was NMPA, specifically, not to try and usurp anybody's credit, specifically. And it was at the direction of Dr. Chavis. And I think Denise Rolock Barnes was the chair at the time. So at their direction, I stayed on top of, and Eleanor Holmes Norton. Not that she needed to be pushed, because Eleanor Holmes Norton is certainly a champion of the Black press. But I stayed on top of that. And from that, we got a GAO report, General Accounting Office report, which showed that in a 5-year span, the federal government had spent $5 billion in advertising, and about 50 million of that went to Black media. So that's $1 billion a year. And as Roland broke it down, 10 million of the billion. Chump change. He said in 2000, when BET was sold, they got 1%. We still getting 1%, is his point. And he's right. But we were the ones who reached out. We were the ones who made those calls. As he, one of the problems is that one of the very few problems I had with what he was saying is that you don't put everybody in that. We did make calls, and I know he's talking about us too, being understaffed and under-resourced. Not under-resourced, which caused us to be understaffed. I cover the White House, I cover Senate, Supreme Court, politics, sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. And some, even our publishers, they say we need more people to do. Well, they got to get the resources. Roland is 100% right. And I learned this, learned this. So as part of his point, I just learned this morning. A member of the Qatari royal family invested $50 million in Newsmax, right? And they did it in a moment of acute Middle East tensions during the Trump administration. The investment bolstered a key conservative media outlet at a time when Qatar was facing intense diplomatic pressure from its neighbors and seeking allies in the United States. At the time the investment was made, a coalition of countries led by Saudi Arabia and the UAE had established a diplomatic and economic blockade against Qatar. They accused Qatar of supporting terrorist groups across the Middle East. Qatar counted on its relationship with the US for protection. They looked to Donald Trump, who initially sided with the rivals, praising their move in 2017 and criticizing Qatar for funding terrorism. In 2019 and 2020, Sheikh Sultan bin Jassim Al Thani, a former Qatari government official and the owner of a London-based investment fund called Heritage Advisors, made the $50 million investment in Newsmax. That investment had not been previously reported. So there is plenty of money being funded, and that goes off the track when it comes to government funding. That's foreign government funding, but the U.S. government, and Roland's point is that is what's going to keep the lights on. That is going to allow, if equity is achieved and somehow achieved, it'll keep the lights on and allow for the hiring of more reporters. Roland went on to say that he would he wants to pay fair wage. He wants to be able to hire some reporters and pay them between, and his words, $75,000 and $100,000. Power 96 says, so I'm lost. So if I see a story, do my own research, call whoever involved, write an article. I'm lazy. And see, not all stories emanate from your own findings, right? Someone may do a story and you do your, like Power 96 is saying, you do your own research. You make your own calls. And sometimes those calls are going to overlap. You're going to call some of the same people that say the Washington Post called, because you have to. They are germane to the story. So no, Power 96, it does not make you lazy. It just makes you a reporter who either didn't get it first, but now you got to provide the information for your base, or B, took your time to get it right. And that was part of Roland's argument too, getting it right. And he's 1000% right about that. Get it right. Now he suggested that a coalition, get a Black-owned media, get together. He cited Martin Luther King in his April 3rd, 1968 speech. And he said something that I found to be interesting, because he's right. Egos need to be placed aside. Now, Roland knows this is not in any way a dig at Roland. Roland knows that he has a tremendous ego. You can't be that successful without having such an ego. But let me say this. When anybody, and I'm not saying Roland was putting down the NMPA, but when anybody wants to discount the NMPA, again, we were the ones who did the work to reveal that disparity in federal government spending. We also know that there's a mechanism to be in line for that funding, which costs money to have that mechanism. And in reality, a lobbyist might be needed. That costs money. And see, the powers that be know it costs money, and I think that's part of Roland's point too. They know it costs money, and they deprive us of that money, because the Black press, 7 years of the Black press of America, have long been counted on. Listen, Martin Luther King, and those civil rights champions used the Black press constantly. In the 70s, to another point that I wanted to make, particularly the 70s and to a point in the 80s. When you wanted to know about your black superstars, celebrities, and entertainers, where did you go? Ebony, Jet, Amsterdam News, Chicago Defender. You went to black owned media. Um, today, today, we talked about this often that you can't get a Denzel Washington on black media. You can't get even a Spike Do the Right Thing Lee on black owned media. Will Smith, black owned. You can't get these folks on black owned media. And why is that? It's not because I don't want to hear well, you're saying that you don't really have the resources, and that's true. But with their participation during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic in 2020, y'all watched us, and many more than y'all watched us because we had big name after big name because they were bored, they had nothing to do, and they had no platform. Now everybody has a platform. All of a sudden, everybody got podcasts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You name them, we had them. The only people we didn't get, I mentioned the two people, Denzel. I spoke constantly. Alan Nerob, who is Denzel's agent, and I had multiple conversations in which Alan led me to believe that he was going to make Denzel available to the black press. Now, years and years ago, about 20 years ago, I had Denzel's direct line. I don't have it anymore, so I couldn't reach out directly to him. But and years ago, when I didn't have his direct line, I had a line to him through Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee, who were tremendous supporters of the black press. I wasn't with the black press at the time. I just mentioned that as a side. But when I wanted a comment from Denzel himself, and I couldn't go through his people or anyone else to get that comment, I went to Ozzy and Ruby, and you know what they would do? You remember that old hit the phone and hit a three-way call? That's what they would do. Today, we can't get we can't get a Jay-Z. People who came from us, people who came from the hood like us. Forget Denzel and Spike. Spike talks the talk and he does some great work, right? Lifting, but he don't talk to us. We did the old school with Spike during the pandemic. Not only did we call and email and text, we faxed 40 acres in Brooklyn. Faxed notes to him. Hey, we trying to get you. And Spike was like, I could care less about you, pretty much. But he's talked about coming together. That's what this. So my overall point is Roland talking about coming together. It would help if again I got to go in a little bit. Like a couple of years ago, we saw Jay-Z, and we still see Jay-Z when he wants to take out an ad. He does it in the New York Times. He does it in the Washington Post. He does not. And he's not the only one. I mentioned him because that was a big situation, and I think it's almost unforgivable. And people say, yeah, he's doing other great things for black people, and I'm not trying to take that away from Jay-Z. But Roland says to come together, and black folks have to work hard. Dr. Chavis during the pandemic was probably the only one, and I don't think Roland was doing this. And again, it's not a put down of Roland, but Dr. Chavis during the pandemic. First of all, he proved once again, and he didn't have to do all this, to prove once again that how valuable he has been and remains to the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Dr. Chavis, during the height of the pandemic, he would be like 3 people on the airplane that carried 300 people, but nobody was traveling except Dr. Chavis, putting on a spacesuit basically, and that's not an exaggeration. Going out, making money for NMPA. It was, in his words, the most prosperous year, perhaps, in NMPA's history, financially. And that was because he brought his reputation with him. He brought his connections with him to NMPA, something that nobody in NMPA has or had at the time, and worked his butt off for the black press, for the publishers of the black press. And it's my hope that they are still grateful and forever grateful for somebody putting themselves on the line like that. But that's what you do in black-owned media. Even Byron Allen, billionaire Byron Allen, who has the Griot, he's not going to just throw money out the window. He has a very small staff at the Griot. They will tell you that. Jaron will tell you that. April will tell you that. We do need more than any other group. We need the federal government to step up because they're doing it with they have been doing it with mainstream media, white-owned media. But this 1% business has to stop. That's the one thing that can change. So when folks have a discussion, an argument, if you will, both can be right. Dawn Montgomery was 100% right. Roland Martin was 100% right. And that's just the bottom line. So if by chance Roland and Byron and Dr. Chavis and others can come together, it would be great for the black community because he's right. At some point, black folks and brown folks alike are going to be saying, can you cover this? And no one's going to be able to cover anything worthy. And we'll talk more about that in the Diddy portion of the program. Federal investigators on Tuesday began what could be a long search for answers about how a massive cargo ship struck a major bridge shortly after it left the port of Baltimore. The ship's crew issued a warning that it had lost power. And I tell you what, had they not issued that Mayday call, that bridge would not have closed, and the catastrophic loss of life would have been tremendous. It would have been just that, catastrophic. We are learning that the vehicles that plunged into the Potomac were those of the workers on that bridge. You know how you go across bridges, go just on the roadway, and the workers, their cars are parked there, and that's what happened here. 2 have survived. One miraculously was virtually uninjured. The other one had some serious injuries and was being treated at, I believe, well, let's just say a local hospital. 6 have been declared dead as they will be on a recovery mission that is expected to continue at some point. But watching that, I thought of many things, and I will say this: I thought of my big sister. My big sister does not like bridges and tunnels, particularly bridges. And I thought, oh my gosh, we need to check on my big sister because we probably, if she has to cross a bridge, we're gonna have to cross bridges to see her because I don't know that anytime soon she'll be crossing bridges to see us. But I thought about also this. We saw some amazing images of 2 very important black men, Governor Westmore and Baltimore Mayor Scott, together, and at some points alone, reflecting together, knowing that everything now rests in their hands. You love to see it, the camaraderie that they were showing. And people will say, well, of course they got to show some camaraderie here. And it's just not that. It's just the image. You remember 9/11 and Rudy took all that credit for what? Just for visiting the site? These men, and I want to say young men too, because Governor Moore is uh, not a senior citizen by any stretch of the imagination, and Mayor Scott is like he's a kid who grew up a reporter. The first question a reporter asked him as he called, as he stepped to the microphone during the news conference, an impromptu news conference, was, "How long do you think it'll take to rebuild?" That was the first question, not about the loss of life or the potential loss or the status of the rescue mission, but about a bridge, a thing, an object. When the families of these construction workers were waiting at a nearby 7-Eleven or Royal Farm store, waiting for word on their loved ones. And this so-called reporter, I'm gonna say so-called because either he's inexperienced or he was just being a jerk, asked the mayor about how long. It was good to see later that the president said that all resources, the federal government will spend all resources eventually to rebuild. Brandon Scott's answer to that question, by the way, was the most important thing right now are the lives, and we can talk about that rebuilding at a later date. But there's one image and that's the one image that I really appreciated. That image right there. Governor Westmore on the left and and Mayor Scott on the right. Michelle Madison says her mother could see the Key Bridge from her sixth-floor condo. She called her early yesterday morning and was very distraught. It's a very distressing sight, even if you live in California. If you live in Alaska and you saw this, anywhere you might be, if you have any sense of humanity, it would have affected you. And not only that, everybody at some point has to go across a bridge. And Power 96 says, look how massive that ship is. Greed, cutting regulations, failing inspections, and whoever allowed that cargo ship to be deemed seaworthy, he or she needs to be in prison for life. And news on that particular ship, it had an accident several years ago. It wasn't as catastrophic, but it crashed into a barge. But again, our certainly condolences go out to the families, and everybody should be rooting hard for those two men right there. And this is not about politics. Again, I cover it. I don't get involved in it. But root hard for those two men. And as I say that again, I have to say, and I see that the Baltimore Times is watching. I guess it's Paris behind the scenes. Um, I say that because that man who took the job just a year ago as mayor, who got the job, grew up big time overnight. Credit where credit is due. And you got to root for him. Now our attention goes to Diddy. And one of the things that Roland was talking about was covering Diddy and how we should have reporters covering Diddy. Now I'm going to say this, and again, in no way am I trying to go against or argue with what Roland was saying. One of the things he said that really struck me, we black media needs to be covering the Diddy case. Black media. When Bill Cosby went on trial in 2017, I remember going to the Renaissance Hotel, which is now the Westin in DC. We had it may have been Black Press Week, or it may have been the annual legislative conference. I don't exactly recall. Actually, I think it was Black Press Week now that I think about it. But nonetheless, I saw Roland, and I had been to Pittsburgh to the jury selection. I'd been to all of I didn't really miss a day of either trial. He had two trials, if you remember. The first one was a hung jury, but 2017. And I remember saying to Roland Martin, Roland, Black media, you and all Black media should be covering this, or at least understanding what's going on there. And I remember Roland's exact response to me. He was a little bit indignant, and he said, Cosby did this to himself. 100%. 100% right. But that wasn't the point. That was not the point. And my point has always been not whether Cosby was guilty or innocent. I saw Andrew Wyatt post a long thing on his Instagram yesterday. Andrew Wyatt is Bill Cosby's longtime crisis manager, saying we stand with Diddy. But my point of the Cosby, and Dr. Chavis's point of sending me, and I mean, it cost us to cover the Cosby case. I was living in a hotel during the Cosby case. And and y'all know me, it's not a 3-star or 2-star. We talking 4 and 5 star. It's my requirement. So Dr. Chavis signed off on about $400 a night. First trial, 6 months? Plus expenses. I had to eat. And I like a steak and a good scotch. So, and then he paid my salary on top of all of that. My point was the same thing that he was saying. The important is not about whether Diddy is innocent or guilty. It's about what happened when those feds went in Diddy's house. They ransacked his house. That man, his kids, did not deserve that. I am certainly not a fan of Diddy. It is none of my concern if Diddy goes to prison. What is my concern? Same thing with Bill Cosby. And they turned the cameras off in the Bill Cosby case, so you couldn't see the Jim Crow proceedings that were going on in that case. And that was what I was presenting to Roland. It wasn't about Bill Cosby. Do you think, and we saw, and by the way, I saw a respectable blogger or podcaster or whoever she is say how the media was wrong. They said, I didn't see anybody in credible media say that Diddy's sons were arrested. Didn't see that. So we got to stop also creating narratives. What was reported, and I reported it as well, was that his sons were handcuffed. They were detained. They were not under arrest. They were detained. But when you are handcuffed, you are not allowed to move unless you are moved or instructed to move, which means you are detained. And that's what happened with Diddy's kids. But what they did to his house, broke open they could have asked one of his kids. They could have asked his lawyers to be there to open the safe. They could have asked Diddy to be there to open the safe. They didn't have to break his safe down like that. They went in. The warrant, we are learning, was for electronic devices. And they yanked things out of the wall. Did they have to do that? Did they have to ransack his bedroom like that? Look at the drawers that are open there. Did you think that a computer is in a small drawer under the bathroom sink like that? Would they have? Did they when they went into Mar-a-Lago? They did not do anything like that. They didn't put Barron in handcuffs. Could you imagine? I understand that if someone's on the scene, law enforcement doing a raid or search, it's pretty much procedure that you uh, clear the house, you clear folks, you may even handcuff them. Yes. Since there was not an arrest warrant, there was no need really to handcuff them or handcuff them from behind anyway. Could have did the honorable thing in front of them. They sat them on the grass. See, this is what Roland's saying. We got to cover it, right? But this has been our point all along. And the Black Press of America, NMPA, like I said, the heck with the resources, the heck with the cost. We are covering Cosby. And we did it twice. We did it when the jury hung in his favor, 10-2 to acquit him. And we did it when he was found guilty the next year when they retried him because of blunders made by the great Tom Mesereau to get a local jury instead of an out-of-town jury again to acquit him or to try him. But again, this is just not about guilt or innocence. Cassie Ventura made some serious allegations in her lawsuit that was settled a day later. Some say it was settled for as much as $100 million. The stuff in the lawsuit, I was explaining this to my wife yesterday, is what appears, I should say, to have prompted the investigation into Diddy. And that investigation that was last November. So they had been talking to, and they admitted to talking to 3 women and a man. One of the women appears to be Cassie. We don't know that for sure yet, but one of the women appears to be Cassie. And there were some crimes, serious crimes mentioned in that lawsuit. And remember we talking about it. I forget who exactly. I know Dawn was on the show. We had someone else. And I believe, Greer, it was an attorney we had on the show, a woman who broke down, or maybe she wasn't an attorney, but she broke down how meticulously worded that lawsuit was. And law enforcement, and not just New York police, Los Angeles police, but federal officials, because this was Homeland Security. Homeland Security. Think about how serious this must have been. And the other part of it is, remember, a judge signed off on whatever evidence they presented to get that warrant. Because you can't just, in a perfect world anyway, you can't just say, I want a warrant. You got to demonstrate that there's a high probability of a crime that was committed, and there's a good possibility that evidence from that crime can be found where you want to search. And so it's culminated in what happened, what we saw on Monday in Los Angeles and in Miami, and Diddy being stopped in Miami as he headed toward the Bahamas for a pre-planned family gathering. But they seized his phones, and they seized his phones in Miami from him. They seized other electronic devices from the home. And here's something else I wanted to mention. And Roland talked about Black media. Folks, it's we talk about canceling. And I think it's just time that Black folks cancel The Root. The root is been working my nerves for a while now. And when the Diddy stuff and in line with what Roland was saying about black owned against black targeted, the root post, aside from Diddy, what about these powerful black men accused of crimes? And they put Jay-Z next to a white woman. I don't know who the white woman is. I don't mind them putting Dr. Dre, because what he did to a black woman was just terrible, and people have easily forgotten that. But they put pictures of Jonathan Major, Charlemagne, et cetera, and then Russell Simmons and Usher in a what looks like they're in a room with and Usher is shirtless. This is a photo that was just taken recently, by the way, in the last couple of months. Usher visited Russell out in Bali. And I'm thinking, see, this is exactly what we don't need. Because I don't see the root saying, what about all these white men? I don't see the root saying, uh, having Harvey Weinstein in the picture or others or the pedophiles from Nickelodeon. Every chance they get, they gaslight because they're black, targeted. So black folks, you're a target of the root. We are black owned. So our target, if you will, is your interest. And so the point of the matter, folks, is yes, we need to, as black media, black owned media, keep an eye on the treatment that did. Look, the justice system has long, and this is again the fundamental thing that I've tried to convey with Cosby. The last thing we want is to take away the presumption of innocence. The last thing, as black people, as brown people, you might as well just eat the gun at that point. Hate to be so graphic. If they take that away from you, because that's ridiculous. So Diddy has not been even charged yet with the crime, but yet they destroyed his home because it's a black man who owned that mansion out there in Holmby Hills over near between Bel Air and Beverly Hills. That's where Michael Jackson died, actually, right a couple of doors over from where Diddy lives now. Had a mansion there. Um, they knew, and trust me, those cops in Beverly Hills, Bel Air area, they they ruled the day when a black person moved in. Trust me, been there. Puffy's lawyers put out a statement that neither well, first they said that Monday's search was a gross overuse of military level force. Neither Puffy nor any of his family members have been arrested. The attorney said, he says, there's no excuse for the excessive show of force and hostility exhibited by authorities or the way his children and employees were treated. He's 1000% right. Somebody had a laser pointed at their head and backed out of there like he was being arrested. It's unidentified person. I don't know who, hasn't been identified, at least to me yet. It was unbelievable. The lawyer goes on to say that Puffy was never detained, but spoke to and cooperated with authorities. Says that he is innocent and will continue to fight every single day to clear his name. And we know everyone says that. We know everyone says that. They'll fight but we will see. We will see. And it's not about giving him even the benefit of the doubt, which as a journalist you're supposed to. But this is not about that. This is about keeping in check those you need to keep in check. Because I'm the first one to tell you, if Puffy is guilty. Let him and R. Kelly, let them two share a cell forever. Because the stuff that even, I mean, let's just dismiss, not, put aside, not dismiss, put aside what the other lawsuits against Puffy are saying. The fact that he, despite, anytime you settle a suit, they say, no admission of guilt or whatever, you're able to still declare your innocence. When you look at Cassie's lawsuit, if he did just a fraction of the stuff that's in her lawsuit, Puffy needs to go to prison. He needs to go to prison. Baltimore Times says the authorities wanted to set a precedent. No, they didn't set a precedent because they continue to do that when it comes to African Americans and Latinos. A wealthy African American, a wealthy Latino will get the same treatment. But when it comes to others, they allow for the lawyer to walk them through the house. And you got the key to this. Yes, please open it. They leave the house. They probably even vacuum for them before they leave. Let's be real. This is absolutely ridiculous what they did to that man's home. Today, we're going to dive into a complex concerning trend within media circles. Speaking of Black-owned and Black-targeted media, it's a trend that's been raising eyebrows and stirring heated debates, and it centers around the one and only Candace Owens. And thank goodness there's only one Candace Owens. A polarizing figure known for her incendiary rhetoric and divisive commentary. She's found herself on platforms like The Breakfast Club, which is not Black-owned, and hosted by personalities like Joe Budden. But the problem goes beyond just individuals like Charlemagne or Budden offering her a space to air her views. It's a symptom of a deeper issue within our media landscape. As celebrated culture writer Teray pointed out recently, he said villains are essential in stories because they push the hero to be their best self. But in real life, Teray says villains serve no higher purpose. They simply do what's best for themselves, often at the expense of others. Candace Owens, with her platforms and power, embodies this modern day villain. Operating within the right wing media ecosystem, Candace Owens plays to white victimhood and anger, catering to an audience that thrives on outrage. Her demeanor, always appearing either enraged or superior, sets a tone of tension and hostility rather than fostering constructive dialogue. She has made a name for herself by attacking marginalized communities, spreading misinformations, outright lies, and peddling harmful ideas. From disparaging the Black Lives Matter movement to downplaying systemic issues like white supremacy, her words and actions only serve to embolden white supremacist narratives. What's particularly troubling is Candace's role as a Black figure within a political movement that's overtly racist, one that vilifies Black people, immigrants, and the LGBT community to cater to white voters. By echoing racist sentiments and absolving her audience of her own or of their own prejudice, Candace becomes complicit in upholding white supremacy. The most disturbing aspect of Candace's presence in media is her betrayal of her own community. Despite claiming to advocate for Black empowerment, Candace her actions suggest otherwise. And we know that. We know that. So let's check out this conversation between myself and our special guest.
Helping our boyfriends move drugs, which is what Breonna Taylor was actually doing, okay? Trailing her, that her name was on the warrant when they showed up at her place. It was not the wrong address. Everything the media told you was a lie. The police officers had every right to be at her property. They had been monitoring that property for weeks.
If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified.
Well, that's the loudest voice. The actually worst thing to be in this society, if one thing I would not want to be, is a straight white male. For some reason, that's considered problematic, right? You have to be something. So people lie. They're lying on college applications. They're like, okay, I'm white.
So in
And you're like, what? Why are you?
2007, Candace Owens was a senior at Stanford High School, and she made headlines for a very different reason. She was the victim of an alleged racial hate crime, which involved the son of Democratic Governor Dannel Malloy, who was then the mayor of Stanford. The incident set off a chain of events that she said or claims eventually sparked her political ideology. Well, several years ago, Owens wouldn't even have called herself a conservative. The voicemails left during that trauma that she experienced on her phone by 4 boys in the car altered her life, she claims. She says they started off by telling me that they were going to kill me just because I was Black. They warned me that if they found me at home, they were going to unload a bullet into the back of my head. She told the principal, and the story spread quickly to state and national media, especially when Malloy acknowledged that his son was in the car. The NAACP held a press conference. In fact, they held several press conferences with Candace Owens. Police and FBI investigated the incident, and one 17-year-old boy who Owens said was a friend of hers was arrested. Owens' family sued the Stanford Board of Education for failing to protect her and won a $37.5 thousand settlement. If I was a leftist, she said, or if I was a true Democrat, I would relish in victimhood. I would love that. I would say I'm Black, I'm a woman, I can't do anything, and it's all your fault. That situation in high school would be the pinnacle of my life, she says. She says, but I hated it. She says, I cowed away from it. She says, it ate at me because I felt there was permanence in what was said about me. In response to Owens' experience in high school, she decided to launch an anti-cyber bullying website, essentially a searchable database of offensive speech found on social media. She launched a Kickstarter to fund the effort and received a flood of criticism in response. She somehow jumped to the conclusion that liberals posing as Trump supporters online were behind the attacks because they did not want her to, quote, unmask them. This experience was her, quote, red pill or conservative awakening. She devoted the next year to re-educating herself, she says, reading Ann Coulter, Ben Carson, Thomas Sowell, and others. She dropped out of the University of Rhode Island and went on to self-educate, she says. Scott Esdell, the president of the Connecticut NAACP, who helped Candace in 2007, said of Candace, it's the same type of thing Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas did. Thomas reaped all the benefits of affirmative action and then tried to roll over on it. It's that kind of mentality and disrespect. You know, Robin, Candace Owens is now, we know that her day job, she was terminated from just the other day. And since then, and actually leading up to that, she has been platformed by people like Charlamagne tha God and the Breakfast Club and Joe Budden, and now she's on this tour in which she seeks out Black media. What's the deal with this, Robin?
I'm sorry. I actually truly I enjoyed thoroughly your the explanation of what led, because I'll be honest with you, I had no idea what led Candace Owens to throughout her journey of where she is now. We called this out. Many people, we're not new to this. We are true to this. We've seen this happen multiple times. When you know that you are losing a grasp, you need to come back. You think you need to come back, and you will be received with open arms to your own community. Unfortunately, it's just that your own community does not necessarily view you as one of ours. You know, as they'd say in the Black community, that Candace is not necessarily invited to the cookout. Now, that's unfortunate, but it's understandable given the many things that she has said about the Black community just as a whole. So I'm not sure how well it's being received as far as I can see. It's giving Black media more things to sort of troll Candace about,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure the effectiveness of it.
Well, right. And that's a part of where I wanted to go too, because there seems to be no pushback. You know, this is an individual who has blamed Black Lives Matter and Black people for everything that ails Black people. This is a woman who said that George Floyd caused his own death. You know, she goes on Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend. She said Breonna Taylor was not asleep when the officers barged into her apartment, and her boyfriend shot first. This is someone who every single time we have a situation, a George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery type situation, she immediately, without being asked, uh, jumps to the defense of the perpetrators who have taken these Black young lives. Torre, the writer, pointed out that villains, he said, are essential in stories because they push the hero to be their best self. But in real life, villains serve no higher purpose. They simply do what's best for themselves, often at the expense of others. And he says, with Owens, with her platforms and power, she embodies this modern day villain.
Mm.
I mean, what is the point of having her on your platform if you're not going to? I mean, if she appeared on radio with you, on the air with you, do we just allow her to spew whatever without challenge?
It reminds me of when Kanye West, now known as Ye, it reminds me of just not long ago when he went on his sort of press tour, and he was just saying everything. This is around the time, obviously, that he was being punished, so to speak, for his anti-Semitic comments that he was making. But we also know that wherever he went, whatever platform he was on, people just opened their arms because they knew that the clickbait was there. And it wasn't you knew that you weren't going to get anything of value. You certainly weren't going to push back. You just sort of let Ye speak about whatever it is that he wanted. That reminds me of Candace Owens now, and in current times. Like right now, I often wonder if Candace Owens actually believes, I think she does believe some of the things that she's saying, most of the things that she's saying, but it's almost as though she's gotten addicted to generating such controversy for herself, you know, because she knows what comes with that. That's what it kind of reminds me of, because you and I could sit and have a conversation and say, there's no way after George Floyd, it was proven, after we've seen the evidence of, you know, how he died, there's no way that someone would actually combat that and fight against it. But Candace Owens will. She actually created her own documentary, if you remember. She wrote it, she directed it, she produced it, she went on, you know, spewing all of these different narratives. And it's like, to me, it just makes me wonder and question if she really has deep belief about these things, or if she's just maybe addicted to her own controversy that she generates.
Is it just a grift? Is it a major grift? Because
Yeah.
that question comes up. And Greer asks a good question. Is the Daily Wire firing really her quote Negro wake up call? I mean, remember when Omarosa was fired from the White House, and now Omarosa is like, you know, she's back. You mentioned the barbecue. She wants to be back at the barbecue. Is this Candace Owens's wake up call?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we've seen this happen again, time and time again. Again, mentioning Kanye, and I've never talked so much about Kanye before in my life, but it just seems to fit the bill right now. Kanye also, he was famous for saying, basically he could not be canceled. And then you fast forward a week or so later, you think that you can just go around saying anything when all of a sudden you're being canceled left and right. Partnerships are being ended, and we know that Candace Owens was on the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne, and she was saying, that Ben Shapiro, who is we know as the co-founder of the Daily Wire, she says he doesn't have the power to fire me. And we wake up to news the next day or so that Candace is fired. It's just like, you can't necessarily go on around thinking that you are untouchable and saying whatever it is that you want, when in fact you are, it's sort of a wake-up call. You are, and a lot of people will say you're just as black as we are, because when it comes to the
Right.
skin tone, the color of your skin, that's really is what's going to matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, white husband aside, right? I mean,
Exactly. That can't
look,
save you.
that can't save you.
That can't
But
save
here,
you.
let's break down some of the foolery, this ignorance that she spewed. Tucker Carlson, this is a quote. Tucker Carlson told the truth about Black Lives Matter. It has nothing to do with Black lives. When 18 Black people were murdered in 24 hours in Chicago. This is right after, she said this right after George Floyd was murdered. She says when 18 Black people were murdered in 24 hours in Chicago, hashtag George Floyd riots, plus 10 people shot in Brooklyn in 1 hour. The movement is about Black anarchy. And she says, and I will never bend a knee to that.
Mhm, mhm.
And no one brings this up to her. So when I say no one, I'm specifically talking about Black people who interview her.
Mhm.
I mean, when you make a statement like that, is there any coming back from that statement? We know that the Black community, Robin, is viewed, and rightfully so, as perhaps the most forgiving community. But is
Mm.
there coming? Are you coming back from that?
Unfortunately, Candace Owens had been sort of her own her own clown in her own circus for a while, for several years, in fact. So she had no need to go to the Black media outlets. This whole this new image, or whatever it is that she's trying to portray by going to Black media, seems to be a new one as far as I'm concerned. And so she's had no opportunity for her to be called out. She's had little opportunity, I'll say, for her to be called out regarding older things that she said. But let's be clear, Candace Owens has said a number of things targeting BLM, targeting
Mhm.
GLAD, targeting the NAACP.
Yep.
She said a number of things that are hurtful, they're harmful. But she's gone on for years, just being able to talk about whatever it is that she wants, and she controlled her own world. So the world that she sort of surrounded herself with were her own people, other right-wing conservatives who didn't mind the things. In fact, they supported everything that she said, and she had no reason to look at Black media or even address Black media that was pushing back at her. So now that she's doing this whole, hey, I'm Black, I'm a part of the I'm a part of the community. Now she's on this tour. I don't know why they are not calling her out on specific things that she said in the past. Again, there's just a string of different things that she's mentioned. But I will say that what I enjoyed is watching her on the Breakfast Club, and they were sort of trying to establish that she wasn't necessarily familiar with some of the things in the Black community. So why come back here if you're not even familiar with how we
Yeah.
operate? And it seems as though that's what they were trying to establish, maybe sort of discrediting her. Um, and as a human being, I don't like to see anyone bashed, or so it's not that for me. I don't want to see, Candace Owens she's a Black woman at the end of the day, so I don't
Mhm.
want to see anything negative towards her, but I would like for someone to call her out and hold her accountable for the things that she said that I deem as disrespectful and again harmful things that she said in our community, and have her really explain those things. But I'm just not sure until she comes over to KBLA 1580 and talks to myself, talks to Tavis Smiley, or talks to any one of our other Black hosts who I believe would call her out. I guess we just have to sit back and watch them, try to discredit her on her Blackness, maybe.
Robin Ayers has such a good heart.
I can't help it. I
Such
can't
a
help
good heart. I mean, listen, I was telling Greer, our great producer, director, and manager of this show, I said, I was thinking about something that we were having a discussion the other day, my family and I, and it was about Judas Iscariot and the Apostle Peter, right? For those who believe in the Bible or whatever, right? And what made one sin unforgivable and the other one forgivable? Peter's sin was proven to be forgivable, right? He denied Jesus 3 times, and then Jesus reaffirmed him 3 times. Judas's sin was unforgivable because he knew who Jesus was. He knew that he was going against the Spirit, and he knew that he was stealing money. He was stealing from the community, as it were, hurting the community. And then finally, he set his price. Candace Owens, in my view, and when you look at her and Omarosa, and I am not a fan of Omarosa, but she's eased her way back. She's like the Peter in this story. I cannot see Candace in any other light than Judas. So that's why I say, listen, y'all got to listen to Robin on her show with Tavis and the rest of them, because she has a really good heart.
I do try. I give people the benefit of the doubt. Although I have to say, I'm not so easily moved to jump on the Candace Owens train either. It's not that. It's just, I feel as though if she were able to speak eloquently, that she could break down her beliefs and then at least be open-minded enough to understand where the backlash comes from, then fine. I mean, if we can come to some understanding, but I'm not necessarily so swayed either right now.
She really believed. Do you think that she really believes what this statement she made? And she made this statement November 20th, 2020. She says organizations like GLAAD and the NAACP don't exist to eliminate racism and homophobia. They exist to provide a spotlight to them so that their company executives can rake in millions and line their own pockets. This is common sense. Do you believe she believes that?
Sadly, I mean that's sort of the question that I was asking earlier. I'm just not sure if she wholeheartedly believes that, or if she just wants to say something controversial. But a part of me does believe that she truly feels that way. But this sort of makes sense to me, Stacey, because once someone has a negative experience with the Black community, if you are Black yourself and you have a negative experience with the Black community and or an organization such as she had with the NAACP, it makes you look at things a little bit more skewed and probably not in a positive light. So it's not that I agree with Candace by any stretch of the imagination. I don't agree with her. It's just that I understand that someone like her who's the foundation of your political career and your commentary, the foundation of that, it stems from a place of a not good experience, and so many of us can actually relate to that just in terms of anything else that we've gone through in our world. But I understand why she could believe so much of the things that she says. It's because it stems from her particular experiences.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you another one that one of her more infamous comments based on, this is a quote, based on the hierarchy of what's impacting minority Americans. If I had to make a list of 100 things, white nationalism would not make the list. White supremacy and white nationalism is not a problem that is harming Black America.
That is such a delusional statement. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
It is absolutely delusional. And as much as Candace Owens, I mean, she even stated before that she believes that she tries to hold white America accountable. And she says that speaking about black people in the black community and sort of holding us accountable is only 10% of what she talks about. And not that I believe that at all, but it's what she says that is just so polarizing and it's just unbelievable. Can you actually believe that you made that statement? And furthermore, do you believe that in your heart that that's not the truth? And so I don't know what lens Candace looks through when she's looking at America, but it is completely absurd and it's definitely skewed.
Yeah, and as Greer points out, how can any decent person of color in in captivity, she says, go on Tucker Carlson and say the black people are the most murderous in America. She actually said black men are the most murderous. Um, and that's where, again, many of the problems that myself and others have with her is, black men. We talked about black women earlier, and we know the plight of black women. The strongest individual in the world, hands down, is a black woman. There's no question about it.
Mhm.
And Malcolm X said the most disrespected, and it's still true. Um, Second to them are black men, the most disparaged, I would say. And she goes on to say that they're the most murderous. I mean, again, these are things, and before, in the next couple of minutes before we leave, I'm going to darken Robin's heart a little bit. I'm going to try anyway. but she spews these things, and my issue is not just that she spews them, Robin, but when she goes on. We had Charlemagne on this program a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, long before he had her on. And I wish we'd have had him on after he had her on, because I don't understand, as a black man in America today in 2024, you don't bother to challenge that. But as a black woman, when you hear a black woman say something like that, are you moved, Robin, to challenge that?
100%, Stacey. I come from a place where my brother, who is now deceased, meant everything to me. Still, his soul still means everything to me, and the
Yes.
protection of him means everything to me. And that has moved me so much so where I look at every black man, whether in America or just globally, I look at every black man who is mistreated as my brother. So, going back to George Floyd, when I saw that happen, and I'm looking at him, obviously, just as a human being, you're moved to emotion, but
Yes, as a human being.
as a human being. But obviously, I'm thinking of him like he's a brother. That could have been my brother. But in addition to that, I know what my brother had to have gone through just in his life. It is so hard for the black man. And so you, even if you're logical enough and you have any sort of emotional attachment to black men, you understand the plight. You understand the plight of black men. So I don't care if we do see the riots. I don't care whatever it is that we see. You understand where it's coming from. We're just trying to be heard. And so, and that stems from being mistreated. And so if your voice isn't loud enough, it's like, well, what else can we do? Let me show you. Let me demonstrate something. And as a black woman, I can get behind that. I understand it because I have an emotional attachment to black men. So for her to say something that is just so completely destructive,
Right.
as to black men being like murderous and just the number one group of people who are even like the White Lives Matter, it's just like I can't understand it. I can't get behind it. And I feel like she just has no emotional attachment, but it actually does make sense when I look at who you married. And this is not bashing her marriage. I love
Right.
love. I had a white stepfather who is now deceased, but he was one of the greatest men I've ever known. He treated my mother very, very well. So I'm not knocking the love that they have. What I'm questioning is your attachment to your own people? That's what I
Right.
question.
Yeah, similar to or detachment to her people.
De-
Similar,
Very well stated. I received that. Yeah, well stated.
well, similar to um, Clarence Thomas, similar to Ben Carson. I mean, Byron Donalds. We can go on and
Oh,
on and
Herschel Walker.
on.
We could list them all
Herschel
out. I mean,
Walker.
there's yes.
Yeah, what possesses uh, black folk like them to do this stuff? You know, we are talking on this program later this week. You know, it's been 30 years since the murders of O.J. Simpson's ex-wife and her friend, and we're talking about all of the white noise that has come along with that. I mean, we even, as Greer pointed out, when she did some scrolling through history, even at the White House in the briefing room, there was this statement issued by the White House when OJ verdicts came down, and everyone remembers how they divided on both sides. And really, what that is all about, or was all about, it was not about OJ Simpson. It was about black people finally seeing a black person, a person who looks like them, win in the court of law.
Hmm.
You know, I don't think black people at the time cared if
Yeah.
OJ did it or he didn't do it. I think it was about, we just had Rodney King and those cops skated. We watched. They told us that what we saw with our own eyes wasn't true.
Hmm.
Those cops didn't beat him to kingdom come,
Yeah.
right? Um, and I think what we're seeing here and have seen with the Candace Owens of the world is the same thing. She is trying to tell black folks that they're not seeing and experiencing
Mm.
what they have seen and experienced in this country.
Round of applause. That is that a round of applause, Stacey. That's exactly. I think you said it perfectly. Um, I think that that is sort of this narrative that she's trying to get across. Obviously, it has not penetrated. If you, if you, I mean, you can, I'm sure you pay attention to articles, platforms, media, social media, all of it. I look at comments. It's sort of my job to go through and just stay on the pulse of what's happening. And it's just not, it's not penetrating. It's not penetrating her. After everything that she said, after what she stands
Mhm.
for, and you have years of proof of what you believe and what you stand for, it's definitely hard for you to try to come back into the community. And even, you were questioning Charlemagne and her recent interview on that platform. It's hard to believe that they are trying to do what they can to sort of pull her along a little bit more into the Black community by playing the games. Like I called it entertaining,
Mhm.
trying to sort of discredit her Blackness. That is entertaining, and I guess maybe it's funny. But at the end of the day, what are we doing here? You're going to use this platform. You're going to use this time. Just, and I know that they talked about more than just, discrediting Blackness and
Right.
saying God is good, and trying to test whether she could say all the time or and all the time God is good, whether she, that was fun, that was cute. And I know that they talked about more than that. They talked about more than her marriage, but it's like you have a specific amount of time. What do you want to use that time for? And
Right.
so I'm having a hard time just even getting on board with that. Again, mentioning these Black media outlets that she's going to right now, what are you going to use that time for? And so for me, if she were on my show, I do my and I'm this is no knock against any other journalist. Everybody has
Right.
their own lane, and they're doing however whatever they see fit. But if she were on my platform, I'd like to bring up all those text message or the tweets that she had previously put out. I'd like to, interrogate that a little bit more in your mindset, and even question what's up. Like, how come you come on this platform? Why are you going around talking to all the Black media? What's behind that? What are you trying to do with sort of formulating this new image, if in fact that's what you're trying to do? Where does that stem from? So I'd question it a little bit more if it
Yeah,
were me.
absolutely, absolutely. And we all know when Black people say Black Lives Matter. They're not saying white lives don't matter.
Right.
They're not saying Hispanic lives don't matter or Asian lives don't matter. It's pretty much, look, can't y'all understand our lives matter too?
That's right.
And to exploit that in any other way, just like she says about slavery. Now, you can make a point that the blanket, if you could just say, oh, if they're saying only Black Lives Matter, okay, Candace, now you can make a point. If you want to say some Black folks might be clinging to victimhood, but you could say the same thing about white folks,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that is there's so many issues with Candace Owens. I'm so glad that Robin Ayers took the time to even consider the myriad of issues with Candace Owens in the Black community. But as I said, she has such a good heart. So when you get her on KBLA 1580, please give us a heads up so we can tune in, because we will be tuning in for sure. That's for sure.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and appreciate the platform to be able to talk about these issues. And thank you for all that you're doing to bring awareness around these issues as well. So completely appreciate you. And yes, KBLA 1580, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific time. You could always catch me. I talk entertainment, but I talk Black culture, Black entertainment, and I try to utilize these stories, whatever may be happening out there in our world, just to try to pull some sort of meat and potatoes, some substance out of it to talk about in our community. So yeah, that's what I do.
And you don't have to be in California to hear KBLA 1580, right?
That's right. Yeah, we have the app KBLA 1580, and I'm also on YouTube. So I do YouTube. My show is called The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, and it's fun. It's pretty fun every day.
There you go. Well, we are fans. We are definitely
Thank
fans.
you.
And we also, Robin, we certainly wish you nothing but the very best on your health journey as well.
Thank
You and your family. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for joining the Black. Yeah. Just a quick. David Youngblood asked about whether or not Candace Owens is father agrees with her. Absolutely, he does not. He's been quoted as such a few times that he does not agree with her. But we appreciate Robin Ayers. Check her out. And she's at Robin Ayers on X and on Instagram as well. Thanks so much. We have much more to come tomorrow. And I see that some of you have been paying attention to our uh, subscribe on YouTube. I've noticed. So keep paying attention to that and hit the subscribe button and share it. Thank you so much for watching. Let it be known. We will see you again tomorrow.